Welcome to the 8-Bit Instructor Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you level up your instruction in order to craft authentic learning experiences for both you and your students. I'm your host, Lee Tucker, a high school English teacher and ed tech enthusiast, and I want to join you on your journey to becoming the best instructor that you possibly can. So if you're ready, grab your adventuring gear and let's get going. Hey, what's up, 8-Bit crew? Today is Thursday, May 27th, 2021, and this is episode 42 of the 8-Bit Instructor Podcast. So this is it, folks. We are wrapping up this year, and this will be the final episode of this season of the 8-Bit Instructor. I'm going to take some time over the summer to work on some stuff, and then hopefully be back in the fall. So we'll go through all the stuff like normal. I've got a boss battle coming up where I'm reflecting a little bit on things that I've learned this year. I've got a little bit of news and updates from Google for you, and then, of course, the treasure chest. So let's go ahead and look at some news and updates from Google Education. So first thing from Google, if this might be good for those of you who are traveling over the summer, there's some new Google Maps updates to help you navigate stuff. So a couple of things, they've got routing updates to keep you away from potential hard braking situations so that you're not potentially getting into car accidents. There's some live views and detailed street maps for traveling on foot if you're walking around a city, new neighborhood, going on vacation and traveling around. You'll be able to get some more information on that. They're going to be implementing a new busy area kind of thing in maps where if you've seen the traffic stuff where the roads are, green and orange and red because of traffic, you'll start to see areas of cities that tell you if they're extra busy. So if there's a festival going on that you didn't know about, and you'll see that up on your map. And also they're going to have some tailored maps that will highlight the most relevant places based on the time of day and whether or not you're traveling. So be looking for those in Google Maps, some new helpful stuff from there. Also, a new thing coming in is Chrome being able to fix any password issues with kind of one tap. So you've probably already seen where Chrome will tell you any potential issues, information that may have been in an information breach, go change your password and all that. But you have to go to the website, you have to log in, you have to change your password and all that. For supported websites now, Google Chrome will actually do all of the password stuff for you. So you can, select your new password and it will log into the site and change the password and all that. So that's an interesting new thing coming from Google Chrome. And then the last thing is some new Google Docs and collaboration stuff. So the smart chips stuff that I mentioned a week or two ago are starting to be implemented. So you can use the @ symbol, not just to mention people, but you can actually attach documents in there as well. So you won't have to do the whole, type it out, highlight it, add a link, and then go find that link. If you use the @ symbol, you can pull stuff directly from your Google Drive and kind of embed it in there. Also, you're going to be able to add checklists in Google Docs, which I love. Being able to put together a checklist, that's something that can be very handy for students as well, to have that list to check off. So be looking for that. If you remember last week, me talking about Google Docs switching over to the Canvas-based stuff rather than the HTML-based, part of that is that now they're going to be pageless docs. So docs will look a lot more like a website than maybe an actual word processor. So that's kind of an interesting thing. There's also going to be, like I said, checklists. You'll have table templates in docs to make things a little bit easier. And something that I've already kind of noticed on some of my Google accounts is being able to work in Meet directly from a docs sheet or a slide. So if you are collaborating with some others in a Google Doc, you can have a little pull down menu where you can go ahead and sync in Google Meet videos. So that's kind of cool. And then another new interesting thing that's coming to Sheets that I thought was pretty cool was a timeline view in Sheets. So if you have something like you're scheduling out a bunch of stuff, if you're just looking at a sheet, it's all in a bunch of cells and all that kind of stuff. But if you've got dates and tasks and all that involved in a sheet, there's going to be a timeline view where you can get a better idea of what needs to be done when. So there's that. There's several more things in there. I'll have all that stuff linked in the show notes that you can take a look at your leisure. So that will wrap up news and updates. So we're going to go ahead and open up the treasure chest for this final week. So today's treasure chest is kind of just something I've been thinking about a lot, and I've mentioned it a few times on various podcast episodes, but the real idea that I'm looking at is finding your passion. And I'm not talking necessarily about teaching. Most of us, if we're in this profession, we already kind of have that passion, but what I'm thinking more about is finding passions that you can implement in your classroom. Because, we're in there so often, we spend so much of our time in our classrooms that we tend to get kind of bogged down in that kind of mundaneness of every day. But I think if we can take our passions then and implement those in some way into our classrooms, then that brings us a lot more joy than we're already experiencing in our classroom. So, for example, I love graphic arts and graphic design. I love designing stuff and creating stuff. And I've really, in the last couple of years, started doing a lot of that in my classroom where I just decided, I'm going to try to make things more visually appealing, not just for, not just because I'm trying to be a certain way. It's because I get a lot of joy out of designing something that looks really good. And I want to be able to do that and share that with my students to hopefully engage them a little bit more than what would normally kind of be there. So over the summer, as you're kind of resting and moving toward next year, think about what are some things that you love doing that you could really implement in your classroom. So that's the final intro segment for this season. And next up, we're going to hit our final boss battle. And we're just going to take a look back at a crazy year teaching through a pandemic. As we wrap a bow around this crazy year that we have had, I wanted to take time on this final episode of the season to really just reflect back on some things that I learned and that I gained from this past school year. Now, it's no secret that this year was tough. It was by far the most stressful year that I think I've had, maybe even more so than my very first year of teaching. And I mean, there are physical things. I've had jaw issues, I guess, from being stressed and clenching my jaw so much this year and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't want to focus on the negative stuff. This year was not 100% bad. There are good things that happened this year, and I wanted to focus on the positive as I end out this season of the podcast, because it's very easy to see and hear and read all of the negative stuff that's gone on this past year. But I think a lot of the positive stuff gets buried among the negative. So I wanted to take some time, and I've just been really reflecting about teaching through this pandemic and the things that I've kind of learned, the things that I've gained from it, and hopefully things that I will take with me moving forward. And not just me, but hopefully education as a whole can start to move in some of these directions. So I really just had a few things that came to mind as I was reflecting and thinking on this year. So the first thing is, I think, kind of the obvious one, and that's the idea that all of us were pushed to be innovative in what we did in class over this past year. It's been at this point a year and a couple of months since the pandemic hit, and most of our schools probably shut down last March. And in March, we really had to scramble around because for us, at least in my district, it was almost like an overnight thing. We had a teacher work day on a Friday, and I remember we came in on that Friday morning, and basically they told us, hey, your job today is to plan out next week online because on Monday, everybody's virtual. So it was kind of a spur of the moment, very chaotic throw something together end to the year, but coming into August and September, we knew that what we were coming into, and so we had time to plan for it. And so knowing that we were going to have to be online, that we might have to be fully virtual for a handful of weeks, or hybrid, or I had students face to face and students online, and so I had to be really creative and really innovative with the way that I do things, because I had to think about all of the different kind of aspects of students interacting with what I was teaching. And I for sure did not get it perfect this year, because I know there are a lot of places where I just kind of dropped the ball on things. There were a lot of times that I probably neglected my virtual students because I was just trying to take care of stuff in the classroom. But it did force me to be a little bit more innovative in the way that I handled things, in making things more efficient in class, having resources available to students everywhere. And so I think that's a very good thing to take forward with us, is looking at the way we do things and looking at ways that we can innovate on that, not just for the sake of innovating, but for the sake of being more effective in what we do. The second thing that really stuck out to me is the fact that we focused a lot more on student relationships through all of this. There was this, whole big deal about social emotional learning and taking care of students' mental health and all of that. And say what you want. I've heard a lot of people, say, it's not a teacher's job to be a counselor. It's not a teacher's job to be a parent, and it's not a teacher's job to do this and do that. And I agree, it's not. But also, we are there for the students, and I think it is important to focus on creating a whole human being, not just focusing on the content that we teach, but going beyond our classroom walls. And one of the things that I think was a very positive outcome of this is that we did kind of gain, at least I did, and a lot of people I've talked to, a more maybe global perspective of things. It made us look at what we do in class and maybe how we can connect it to things outside of class. And we focused on, student well-being in order to help them learn. Students who are going through stuff, and a lot of this are not going to do well in school, and we've heard it a lot in the kind of physical nutritional realm, where if students are hungry, if they're not eating at home, if they're 36 hours since they've last eaten, they're not going to do well in school. And I think the same goes for just the relational aspect and the social aspect of it. If they're not having those needs met, then they're not getting a lot out of our class. And so I think being able to step back and look at kind of the bigger picture, knowing that our classroom content is not the end-all, be-all, even though it is important. I'm not saying that our content is not important, but putting things into perspective and getting priorities realigned so that we're taking care of our young ones. So the third thing that I really came up with was kind of funny, because I was thinking about the stuff that we try to get students to do. And a lot of times, we talk about this idea of students trying and failing and learning from their mistakes, and the whole idea of trial and error, when a lot of times we as teachers, we don't do that. We sit back with what's comfortable for us, what we've always done, because we don't want to, test something out. We don't want it to go bad. We don't want a lesson to be bad or whatever. But this year, at least for me, was very much a trial and error year. If for me, my perspective, the way that I approached this year was kind of, if there was ever a year to try new things and learn from failing, then this was the year to do it, because there were already, all of these crazy chaotic things going on. And so why not try some new things? Because what was going on was probably not going to work anyway. And so why not try something new to see if it worked better? Because, in my opinion, it wasn't going to be any worse than anything I had done before anyway. So trying new things out, learning from those mistakes, learning how to do some of this stuff better, so that when I come back next year, I can have some of those ready and tested out, so that I really know a little bit more what I'm doing. And it helped me to really take some risks in class this year and learned from them. I tried some new things with grading this year in order to take the stress off of my students, and just from what I've observed, it has been very beneficial. And looking at their grades, and they're taking finals this week, and they're doing just as well on stuff as students in the past have done. And so when I look at that, a lot of things that I've done it worked pretty well. So that whole idea of trial and error, don't be afraid to try some of those new things. Even if it's not perfect, you just got to kind of sometimes throw it out there and learn as you go. To go along with kind of my second point about student relationships, I think a lot of us learned to be more understanding and more flexible in class this year. And the reason I say that is we often harp on things like deadlines and due dates and all that, which I agree are important, but also being understanding of student circumstances and student situations. And I think a lot of times we can be maybe blind to outside circumstances that our students have. So I know, for example, I had seniors this year in a couple of classes who, talking to them, they would be at school at 8:30, and then they would be there until 3:30, and then they would go straight to work after school and not get off, a lot of them, until midnight. And the last thing that they're going to be able to do is homework when they're getting home at 12:30, 1 o'clock, and still having to settle down. And a lot of them, it was 2 o'clock before they're able to fall asleep. And then they're up at 6, 7 o'clock the next day. They're not getting enough rest. And so being understanding of that and knowing that, I was able to be a little bit more flexible with the way that we did things in class, a little bit more flexible with my expectations, in a realistic way to still push them and help them strive to do more. And, I just last week I had a really great story, and I wrote a blog about it that you can check out. But it's one of my seniors who was one of these guys who was not getting hardly any sleep at all, came and told me that he really appreciated how much I had pushed him to be better throughout the year. And it just meant a lot to me, and something small like that went a long way for me. So taking that forward, I want to be understanding of students, and I want to be able to work with them and be flexible with them to help them get better, regardless of where they are. So things like their home circumstances, their work circumstances, all kinds of things that students are dealing with is very important to understand and to work with. And then the last thing that I really got that a lot of people seem to have come across. And one thing, if there is one of my kind of reflective lessons that I hope does not go away, it is this one. And that's just the idea that we finally, as a whole, started thinking about why we do the things that we do in class. So going back to the idea, in the first point about being innovative, we got pushed to do things differently when we went virtual, when we went hybrid, or whatever we ended up in. We realized that we couldn't do class the same way that we had always done it. Even teachers who are creative and innovative and trying new things still had to work to change and look at what they do. We evaluated what was important in school and what was key in our own classroom. So even within our own content areas, we trimmed down stuff, and we looked at the key priorities and all that. And then we looked at different ways that we might look into it. I know at the end of last year, March, April, May, one of the things that kind of freed a lot of teachers up was when they canceled standardized testing, and we realized, hey, we can actually teach kind of free of teaching the test kind of stuff and test prep. And even though that stuff came back this year against a lot of our wills, we still, a lot of us kept those lessons and looked at what is it that we're doing. I make a point that not everything that we've always done is bad. I think there is a pendulum swing sometimes to the far side where nothing that is traditional is good, and it's not necessarily that way. There are plenty of tried and true methods in teaching and aspects of teaching that have always worked well, and that's the reason why we've still done them, is because they are tried and true and work well. And then at the same time, not everything new is great and wonderful. There are plenty of new things out there that we find out are not great, or we find out don't work. And so what we have to do is we have to have that critical mind. We have to be critical of what we're doing in class. We have to evaluate everything regularly. We have to look at, what did we do this year? What worked? What didn't work? What could we do better? What can we change? And keep the things that work really well, and then tweak other ones, or change it completely, or throw it out. We all have those projects that we love doing. It's, every year, man, I can't wait to get to this one project because the kids always love it. And at some point, a lot of times those projects, they stop becoming effective, and we have to be able to let go of some things like that in order to do things better and be effective with our students. And so hopefully we will continue to be critical and reflective in looking at what's working well in our classrooms and what's not. And hopefully, ideally, that stuff will filter up into the decision makers who can enact some of that change and make things hopefully a little bit better, a little bit easier for us in the classroom. But just know that we can still do our best in our classrooms. So those are my reflections on this crazy year. It like I said, was definitely stressful, but it was not all bad. And all things said, I feel like I had a pretty good year, and I love the students that I got to teach this year, and I feel like I got to know them a lot better than students I've had in previous years. So hopefully that kind of stuff will continue on, and hopefully you've had some really good reflections on things that you would like to carry over into future years of teaching. So that is our final boss battle of this season, and hopefully we've leveled up to a point where we are ready for what's to come. So, since this is the final episode of the season, I don't really have a question of the week, but I do have some kind of feedback opportunities for you. Just to let you know, this will probably be the last episode of the 8-Bit Instructor. I'm actually looking into a rebranding and renaming, and I've got some ideas for coming up in the fall. I'll still have a lot of the same stuff that I've been doing here, but I've been kind of looking back at what's gone well and what probably needs to be fixed or replaced as far as the episodes go. So I'd love to hear any feedback of things that you really enjoyed about the episodes, or things that just, hey, don't do these anymore because it's not working or whatever. But in all honesty, I think one of the kind of struggles that I've had lately is just kind of the motivation of whether or not to continue doing these. Just evaluating whether the time that I put into this is paying off and it's beneficial. So just to kind of throw that out there, if you have really enjoyed listening and have benefited from the show, I'd love, honestly, just a little bit of encouragement going into the summer and planning for the fall, because I do want to make the best use of my time and making sure that doing a podcast is going to work with everything else that I'm doing. But I'd love to hear from you and love to get any kind of feedback that I can. Well, that will wrap up episode 42. I really appreciate you listening. I appreciate the support since August when I started this. It's been a really great year as far as this goes. I've met a lot of really interesting people, a lot of folks in education that I looked up to and got to talk to them about things that I'm passionate about. So that has really been awesome. And I thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to what I'm putting together. So don't stop. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and get updates when the new season comes out. And again, like I said, I'd love to connect with you online. You can follow me on Twitter at Comic Socks, and share the podcast with folks. Maybe over the summer you can get some more folks listening to this first season and come in strong in the fall. So let me hear from you. Stay safe. I'm proud of what you've done. I'm proud of you for making it through this school year. I look forward to talking to you in the fall. And until then, may your swords stay sharp and your shields hold strong. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and check out the 8-Bit Instructor YouTube channel for EdTech tips and tutorials, as well as other content on my website, 8bitinstructor.com. And of course, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Comic Socks and use the hashtag 8bitcrew. See you next week.